All right, so we got some participants showing up. I see Greg is here. We'll get a few more people kind of coming into the room. I'll do some introductions. There's Ryan, Emily, Trev, Joel Patterson. Joel shows up for everything. That's awesome. Ben, New Orleans, Taylor. Well, I can hardly keep up now. Jesus, John, Catherine, Paul Bensfield. All right, so we're rolling on in. For a while here at Petra Coach, a while to me now, Shailee, seems I don't even think when we actually left the office and when we started working from home. I can't keep the date in my head. We've been producing these webinars where we bring, experts on a topic, and we share that with the folks that want to kind of be a part of that presentation and knowledge base. And this past week, I was thinking about, who would be relevant for me to bring in, and who do I know that had a really good story to share. And I thought about you and, some of the triumphs and some of the struggles that you've gone through and what you're going to share with us today. So I was telling my team this morning that, you climbing Everest, you putting the team of women together, you doing the 7 summits, how you raised the money to go do all that, and the adversity that you faced. And if people have done hard things before, it makes what we're going through right now just a little bit easier. That perspective and difference between, living and climbing on the side of a mountain in sub-zero temperatures with no oxygen versus, I got to deal with working from home with kids and kind of craziness right now. So we're really looking forward to your story. For those of you who are in attendance, we will be recording this. We will produce it into a blog. It'll live on the website, and anybody that's here will receive it in an email and a recap. So make sure you look for that. Quick introduction. I asked Shailee how tall she was just now, and she said, I'm 5 feet tall and 1 inch heels. So I met Shailee at MIT, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I've seen her speak a couple of times. I love this presentation. I love her spirit, but she's she's small. She's like this tall, and she's gone and she's done these amazing, amazing things. In 2008, Shailee scaled Mount Everest. She's going to tell us that story. She went on to lead the 7 Summit Women's Team, which became the world's first female group to scale the highest peaks in each continent. She's now leading programs to train young female survivors of trafficking to become trekking guides. So I want to talk to her I want her to talk a little bit about that. And Shailee, after, I'm going to send you a link. My daughter, who's in theatrical school, just did a video, a little segment about human trafficking, where she played one of the roles, and they're using that at a national conference, assuming they get back to a national conference. She's a motivational speaker. She's also a comedian. So I want to make sure we share a little bit of that as we go along. In climbing Everest and leading a team across the highest peaks in each continent, you hope for the best and prepare for the worst, which is something we're all doing right now. So I am going to turn it over to Shailee to take us through her presentation. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Just post them up there or in chat. Either way, I'll kind of bounce in and ask those. And Shailee's internet is down, and she's in Nepal, by the way. She's beaming in from Nepal. It's 11:30 at night over there, and her internet's down. So we're running this off of her phone, and she's limited to a certain amount of time. So about 35 minutes from now, it's going to cut off, and we're going to have 2 minutes of just kind of chatting back and forth with me, and then she's going to come right back, or at least that's the plan. We'll see how that happens. So Shailee, will you take us away and tell us your story?
Thank you, Andy. Namaste, everyone. This is great. It's exactly midnight here in Nepal, so it's cool to be connecting half the world across. This is my home, as in Nepal, Kathmandu. This is where I was born, raised, went to school, had a job, everything here. So when I was growing up here, there wasn't a lot of expectations from girls. I come from an educated family. My mom is a working woman, educated. My dad's super cool. But even in an educated family, I think to a certain degree, probably even today, but when we were growing up, there was no expectations from girls to become, let's say, the president of the country or to run, like become a CEO, let alone climb mountains. So it was a bit, unconventional for anybody, any woman in 2008 from Nepal to try to climb Everest. And that's where my journey starts. The school I went to here in Kathmandu, great school. I'm still friends with most of my kindergarten friends and all, but there was no sports for girls. So I grew up playing nothing, on top of being 4 feet 11 inches tall and petite and underweight all my life. I had no athletic skills or ability, and I always thought that when I grow up, I wanna test what my physical limit is, and that's what attracted me towards Everest. I was definitely not somebody who was like, I'm always jumping off the walls and stuff like that. I'm always athletic, so let me, take it to the next level. No, I was always like studying and then being quiet or laughing a lot. And then I was like, okay, let me try this. When I met my team in the year 2007, at the time I was working as a journalist, I had this sorry little story that, there was no sports in my school. And then I made my team. Here's a picture of some of my teammates. This is us in Africa. When I met them, it blew my mind. One of my friend, Maya, she had run away from her home at the age of 14 to escape forced arranged marriage. When she returned, she had a very troublesome childhood because her community discarded her. Another friend was considered not beautiful enough to find a decent guy as a husband for her. So all these, challenges, and yet they were able to carve a life for themselves in these adversities. So I felt like I was born in the capital, and I was just sitting here and complaining that there was no sports in my school. Like, I could have done so many things, and I didn't. So my friends really put me to shame. These strangers became my biggest inspiration. And when I started training with them, I was like, I don't care if these girls go to the moon or dive into the ocean. I want to be with them. Like, this inspired a lot. This is my team. This is my pride. So that's how my journey began. We were a team of 10 women, all of us from Nepal, when we came together to climb Everest. And in the year 2007, there were only 7 Nepali women who had climbed Everest. And you'd think, from Nepal, there should be more women. That wasn't the case. So when a team of 10 of us came together, it was put together by this organization called Climbers Club. It was a great initiative, but when we went around asking people for support, because we needed to raise a lot of money, that's when we saw the other side of people and society. Turns out people will use any and every excuse and really, really doubt. We were called overambitious. It was called a recipe for disaster. Just 10 young petite women, these are going to be damsel in distress kind of was the picture we painted. It's a rather long story, but in a nutshell, there was support, definitely 100%. There was also a lot of apprehension. And in our team, we did not know how many of us would make it ourselves. Because in mountaineering, even if one person makes it to the top, you're successful as a team. That's the most important thing. And even more important is that everybody comes back alive and intact. That's the number one definition of success in the mountains. So we were very, very clear about that. And that meant that I may not personally be on the summit. As a team, we work together so that at least somebody gets up there. So knowing that, we left for the big climb. There's some pictures. This is my team at the base camp, all 10 of us with 2 of our leaders who put together this expedition. This is how we go up the big rock, the climbing map of Everest. When we reached the base camp, it was incredible. It was like time just froze. Like it was like you know, one of those frames from the movie, because literally we could see being watched from all corners. It's very rare for Everest to have a team of 10 women marching together. So that picture is still fresh in my mind. The higher we went on Everest, there were just so many layers of challenges and lessons. Usually, I think that in life, the intensity may not be, you know, super thick all the time. So sometimes, you know, we might have a lull of a year or two, and then we go through some crisis or happy times. Whereas when you're climbing a mountain, our Everest expedition was 45 days. So it's 45 days of like super intense boiling. So you come back with a lot of good, bad, ugly. It feels like an entire lifetime. So when we're going up, I still remember when we reached the first camp, I'm at 6,000 meters, which is around 20,000 feet. And I'm probably slightly taller than the tent. And there is the fourth highest mountain in the world, Mount Lhotse. There is Mount Lola. You still can't see Everest. And there's Mount Nuptse. So it's almost like, you know, a valley. On three sides, it's mountains. And I'm this tiny speck standing there. And it was a deep moment for me. Because that moment, I really thought of my mom. Because my mom, my entire life, Andy, you like this? She's been telling me my entire life, she kept telling me, oh, how I wish my daughter would be an inch taller. Oh, how I wish you were just a tad bit taller. And one day I apparently told her that my mom, a few inches is not going to stop me from living the life I want to live. And that kind of shut her up, so she never said that again. But when I was there, I was this tiny little speck in this vast scheme of nature. I was like nothing. And I was like, I laughed because I was like, I could be 4 feet, I could be 7 feet, and I would still be nothing compared to these big 26,000 plus mountains here. But at the same time, these tallest mountains in the world with the little feet I have, somehow as a human being, I do have the power in my tiny steps to scale all of that height. So that was one moment where I felt super tiny, it's super powerful at the same time. And I was like, I wish my mom could see this. So that was a beautiful moment I had at the first camp of Everest. You do multiple rotations from the base to the first, you come down, and then you go up to the first, and then second, you spend a couple nights there, come down. And then third, you're at 24,000 feet, you're on bottled oxygen, and then you go towards the last camp. Now the last camp is about 8,000 meters, which is 26,300 feet. That's where the death zone starts. When I say death zone, or when anybody says death zone, it means that there is very little air. The air is thin. At the base camp, there is 50% oxygen compared to sea level. At the summit of Everest, it's about 30%. So we're very, very high when we're at 8,000 meters. So there's thin air, and the environment is too hostile to support life. So we're all visitors there with maybe a couple days, couple hours. And our body, in order to survive, is almost trying to kill us. Because, for example, the food we eat is not going to give us much energy. So my body is literally eating itself up. So death zone is not called death zone for nothing. It is a place where death comes very, very easily. And that's why last camp onwards, you want to be swift, you want to be very effective, efficient, and you want to reserve enough energy that you can survive, because it's not just about making it to the summit. You have to have the energy to come back as well. Now, because we were a team of 10 women, we were split into 2 groups so that each team had more resources and there were more chances of all of us making it. So I was part of the first group, and I arrived at the last camp, the 4th camp, on 21st of May, together with the rest of my teammates from Group A sometime late in the afternoon. And it was a beautiful day. Everything was perfect. I was with the rest of my teammates. And from the last camp onwards, each climber is assigned a mountain guide, usually called Sherpa, a high mountain guide, who goes with us to the summit of Everest, who guides us to the summit of Everest and comes back till the last camp. So we're all, wondering who we're going to be assigned to. And here I was assigned to this young Sherpa Pasang, and he had not made it to the summit himself before, but we're a big team. I expressed my concern to my leader, and he was like, no, we're a big team. We've always been together, so this is going to work out. So I was like, okay, cool. I mean, he was right. I don't know what happened that evening, but we started, well, by the time I got ready, my team had already started. And I have no idea, but we probably had a gap of 20 minutes or something. And that's something you can never cover in the mountains. So we could not close that gap. So emotionally, it was a very cold start for me because I have a great team. I had a great team. We had been together in everything. It is fundraising, training, all kind of preparations. And here, the most crucial moment, I was not with my team, and that hurt bad. But you only got one shot in the death zone. So we continued, and we had a little accident around 1 a.m. There was a falling rock that hit Pasang's summit suit, and I remember him asking, like, what should we do now? And I just said, let's turn around in Nepali. And that's all the conversation we had. There was no further conversation. We have this big mask and all this. You don't talk much anyways. So we both started returning. Now, this is 1 a.m. It's dark. Very, very, very quiet. You can hear the sound of silence. It's that quiet. And there are these big two giant mountains, Everest and Lhotse, almost like mirror images of each other. And the whole world is kind of dead asleep below all of this. And emotionally, I am feeling worse and worse because first I was not with my team, and now we have this little accident. And it was not my fault. That's what made it worse. For example, if I was sick, or or I was not fit enough, if it was something of my fault, it probably would have been easier for me to say, okay, my bad. But here I was doing everything right, and I was in great shape, but I had to give it up. And on Everest, on any big mountains, the final summit push, you usually don't get a second chance because most likely you'll be exhausted anyways. It's too risky for you. And then weather might close in. You might have limited resources and number of reasons. So knowing that, making that decision to turn around was not easy, but at the same time, it was not difficult because we knew very, very clearly that coming back from a mountain is success. Dying on the mountain is not. So as we were turning around, there was a bigger crisis unfolding. There was a person from another team who had just collapsed, and he was in a fetal kind of position. And by the time we got there, he had already passed away, and his Sherpa was trying to revive him. He was trying to get a response from him, and that didn't happen. The Sherpa had a radio, so he was talking to his leader. Pasang and I, we didn't have a radio, so for us, we didn't have anybody to communicate with when taking these decisions. We had to rely on the preparation that we had done before. We had anticipated several kind of risks, like, it could be weather, it could be health, etc. But this was not something we had anticipated, that we might be by ourselves. So we just had to go back to, the definition of success we had decided previously on, and that's how we had started coming down. But here, it was somebody else who actually did not make it. and his Sherpa obviously was having a very hard time because now he has to, get a whole machinery in place. He was talking to his leader, and the leader initially was eventually he said, okay, I'm going to send some men for your help. And that's when all the conversation, all of that stopped. And once it became quiet and I am just sitting there, the Sherpa, he asked me and Basang if we could give him company as he was going through this. So we said, yeah, sure. So we just sat there for slightly over an hour. And from the moment we started, especially from the moment we had to turn around, I had been very negative. I was extremely negative. I constantly kept asking, why me? Why me? Why me? Why me? Like, I'm not even at fault. And all of this is happening to me. Why me? And when you're in the mountains, they say that you don't climb Everest. Everest has to invite you. So I was asking Everest, if this was your plan all along, why did you even invite me? I could have done something else in life. Why get me all the way up here? Just give me this rejection. So I was asking that to Everest. I had a lot of negativity. And once all of that stopped, the conversation stopped and we just had to sit and wait there. I don't know what kicked in. I like to think that what really saved me at the time was the meditation practice that I'd been doing for a few years at this point of time. Clicked that this is the worst moment of my life. And I have to decide what is the best I can do right now. That just hit me like a hammer in my head. And that made me realize that I cannot continue on this negative trail. It's impossible for me to be positive at this point of time, but I cannot continue thinking negative. I have to stop. So you can't think negative, you can't think positive, and I didn't allow myself to think negative. So that leaves you in a neutral state, which in other words is like Zen. There's no negative, no positive. And it's easier said than done. Today, if I try to, sit and meditate here, it's not easy, but up there, I guess the determination and, all that training, the circumstances, environment there, everything added to it. But once I made that decision, then it was doable. Once I said no negative, you don't have to think positive, but you can't think negative, it was doable. So for an entire hour, I just sat there in pure meditation. There was nothing. There was no positive. There was no negative. And that's when I learned some of the biggest lessons. The gems of wisdom came from that moment of nothingness. Big one was that I just had to accept that, yes, I may not make it. Yes, today's attempt failed. I may not get a second chance. Yes, somebody has just passed away. I have to accept. Like, if I keep fighting the thought in my head, there's just going to be more of why me and all of that. And it just somehow I knew that I had to accept the truth, no matter how bitter it is. And in retrospect, now I know that it is only when you accept the reality, you can do something about it. If you stay in denial, then you're going to cause bigger crisis later. So, but at the time I didn't know this. I just knew that I have to accept. So that's one thing I did right in that moment. Another big realization I had was that the nature there is so big. Imagine Everest. I'm on the high laps of Everest, and there is Lhotse mirroring in front of Everest. It is so high up. The sky is vast. it's crazy. I can't even describe it. And like I said, you're this tiny little speck in that, vast scheme of the universe. And that was the first time I felt like there are bigger forces at play. We take a lot for granted. We take even oxygen for granted. We never think about it. We take everything we assume is a given, that it'll be there tomorrow, that it'll be with you. Like for me, that was my team, maybe, that I always thought it was always going to be with me. But no, nothing is a given. There's bigger force, and maybe as humans, we don't even have the faculty or capacity to understand it. But it's okay. I don't know if I can articulate it the way I experienced it, but that was a big one when I was just sitting there accepting whatever situation I was in. I just knew that there's much, much, much bigger forces at play. And I just have to do the best I can in this situation. There is no point fighting against whatever is going on. I just have to find the best thing to do right now. And I actually dug inside myself. I was like, what is the best I can do right now? And the only answer I could get was to send out prayer for the departed soul. So in my meditation, I just sat there praying for the departed soul. Then the men came. We returned to our camp. Next morning, I talked to my leaders, and one of them agreed to give me a second chance with the second team. And if my talk has sounded heavy until now, after this it was like party time. I mean, obviously the tough journey was still ahead. I still had to be on the summit of Everest, but when I started, I was together with my team, rest of my my girlfriends, the most brightest, beautiful, starry night I've ever seen in my life. You keep going on throughout the night. Everest has its set of challenges, of course, but it just is so beautiful. And this is your once in a lifetime opportunity. So I started with my friends. We are heavily geared up and everything kept going throughout the night. And even when I started, I had the bounce in my walk. So that was a completely different start compared to the previous start. And then there are various sections. I'm going to show you my favorite picture, if everybody can see it. This is what it takes to climb Everest. You keep going throughout the night. You're so high above, and you still can't even see the summit of Everest. That's how high Everest is. You just have to keep going on forever and ever and ever. You cross there. This is Hillary Step. I am guessing a lot of our audience today are Americans.
A lot.
So yeah, I don't know, Andy, if you've heard my joke on this. I usually don't like to get political in my presentations, but this picture is, I can't, it is so tempting. So here it is. This is Hillary Step. If you fall on the right, it's Tibet. If you fall on the left, it's Nepal. So here's my joke from my American friends. This is the biggest wall in the world between two countries, and people still climb it. So I like my joke so much, I tell it and I laugh every time myself. But this is Hillary Step. This is the final hurdle. You cross this, you're on the summit of Everest. People ask me, how big is the summit? All sorts of questions, but that's the answer I can give. That's how big it is. And the first thing when I saw the summit with my eyes, what really struck me was I just stood there and I looked at the summit and I was like, it's not a tower. It's not a pinnacle for the highest mountain in the world. That's very humble. Everest is super humble. And that was like, okay. Okay, like, yeah. So I immediately knew that Everest cannot be the highlight of my life. Like, I knew I was on the summit and I was like, it was like Everest talking to me, like, this cannot be the highlight of your life. There's is more to come. You know, there has to be higher mountains to climb. I was very clear about it. The view has to be speechless, pristine, just very beautiful. Probably the first or the deepest time in my life when I felt one with nature. It was just me and nature. There was room for nothing else. So very meditative in that sense as well. This is me on the summit of Everest. This was 24th of May 2008, around 8 in the morning. I was there with my friends Asha. This is Maya, the runaway bride I talked earlier about. She was there 2 days before us. This is Poojan. So more of my friends here. And remember, we didn't know how many of us were gonna make it. In mountaineering, one person on top is success for everybody. But by the end of this mission, out of the 10 of us, all 10 reached the summit of Everest. And we're the largest and the most successful women team to be on Everest, at least at that, to that point of time. So this was a huge success. And now, Andy, do you want to take questions? I don't know how long I've gone for, or do you want me to continue with the 7 summits journey?
No, I do want you to talk about that, but let me ask you a couple of questions. And if anybody else has questions for Shailee, just put them in the Q&A box and I'll ask them. So just to unpack Everest just a little bit, there's 4 base camps, and then from the 4th base camp, you go through to summit, right? And
so there are 5 camps in total when you're climbing from the Nepal side. So let's say this is Everest. This is the base camp, and there are 4 higher camps when you're climbing from Nepal. So base camp is 17,500 feet. It takes about 8 to 10 days to trek to the base camp of Everest, one way. And then you spend a few days here at the base. And then you go to the first camp, 6,000 meters, so roughly about 19,000 feet. Spend 2 nights there, come back to the base camp, spend some time here, go up to the first camp, go to the second camp, spend 2 nights here, come back to the base camp. So that's the standard practice of climbing Everest. And then you take a longer break, a week, 10 days, recover, recuperate, then push for the summit. So when you do that, you go straight to the second camp, spend a night there, and the third camp, 24,000 feet, you start bottled oxygen. And then spending a night here, then go to the last camp. Last camp, you do not spend a night there. You get here, and then oxygen, you drink. Hydration is super important. Food, maybe chocolate, stuff like that. And then you push for the summit, and then you come back down.
So the total amount, this is what I wanted to get a little perspective on for everybody listening. So the total amount of time that you were on the mountain was how long?
45 minutes, 45 days.
45 full
45 days. So standard climbing time for Everest is 60 days. For my team, it was 45 days, Kathmandu to Kathmandu.
Perfect. And then the question says, how long did it take you to come down? So from, I guess, from the summit, did you go from summit down to base camp 1?
So going back to this, and then summit is somewhere here. We're leaving that. So you make it to the summit, come back and sleep at the highest camp. One night, you're like a dead fish that night. You're super exhausted. And then you skip the third camp. You come directly to the second camp. And then on your way back, you skip the first camp. You come directly to the base camp. So it's like 3 days coming back down from the summit.
And base camp 1 is, you said, around 17,000 feet?
So basically, we don't say base camp 1. The popular lingo on Everest is this is base camp. This is the base where everything happens. And then it's camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4. Okay. So the base camp is 17,500 feet. And it's 50% oxygen compared to sea level. And then it keeps going higher.
And how long did it take you to get from wherever you started to base camp?
So from Kathmandu, we started from Kathmandu. So from Kathmandu, you take 25 minutes flight to Lukla. There's a airport that was built by, I think, Sir Edmund Hillary. And then it's 25 minutes flight. Twin Otter flies you there. Once you land here, it takes about 8 to 10 days to get to the base camp. Just trekking. There's no vehicles. You're not flying or riding anything. You're on your foot for 8 to 10 days. to get to the base camp. 8 to 10 days, depending on how many rest days you're gonna take.
Yeah, so the total descent from summit back to the airport would have been somewhere around 15 to 20 days.
So 3 days back down from the summit is 3 days, probably a day or two to wrap up and everything. And it's actually only 3 days to go back to the same airfield. What takes you about 8 to 10 days to get there, it's only 3 to 4 days to go back, because now you're going towards lower elevation.
Got it. Awesome. And I'm a 14er, so I do those 14,000 foot things out in Colorado. And you know, tell those stories, everybody's like, oh my God, I don't know how I could do that. Well, you started at a place that's high, 3,000 feet higher than the highest elevation I've ever been to on those other summits. We talked about this in Boston a little bit. I got a couple other questions. What did you need to do physically to prepare for this? So what type of exercises, and for how many months in advance?
So overall, my preparation was about 10 months, I think, from day one to finishing the expedition. Because I had no athletic background, I was like clueless if I was put out for Everest at all. I had no idea. So fortunately for me, Nepal Mountaineering Association, which is our alpine association, they have this training called Basic Mountaineering course. I know it says basic, but it's actually very, very intense mountaineering training for high altitude mountain guides. So we were part of that training, and it's a 45 days training in the Himalayas. So we learn everything from ice climbing to crevasse rescue, self-arrest, like all the mountaineering stuff. And we start from pretty basic stuff, like the right way to even put on your harness and stuff like that. So that was 45 days. I was not impressive at all when I started. I was always slow and the last to finish. And so the joke is all the friends started calling me the Prime Minister because I was always late finishing my runs and everything. But by the end of this expedition, this training program, I was able to catch up with everybody else. I was 24 years, so I think, I was I had time to kind of catch up. So, and I loved it. I did not miss a single session. So that was a great training, and that gave me a lot of confidence. That taught me that I have it in me. And then when we returned to Kathmandu, we probably trained for 5 to 6 hours every single day. A couple hours in the morning in the outdoors, and then a couple hours in the evening in the gym. And then weekends were longer hikes with weight. So varieties of different kind of training, from high altitude to Kathmandu-based training.
Awesome. So David Frick, you can do this. You can get ready in like 10 months. So you can absolutely do it.
If anybody asks me if they want to climb Everest, I would now, with everything that I know, I would recommend at least a plan of 2 years, at least 2 years, preferably more, 3 to 5 years, but at least 2 years. I highly recommend climbing a couple other, smaller peaks. Yeah, we did it, but there are certainly things we could have done better.
David said he's old. It might take him 12. So we'll see. I want you to get to the Seven Summits women's team, because, and the context a little bit here is, if you think about what Shailee put into getting to the top of Everest, I mean, that's like a year of her life just put into that one thing. And it's not like you were, it wasn't your job, right? It wasn't what you got paid to go do, right? So you had to figure out how to put these pieces together in order to allow you to go do this, and to bring, other women with you. So please jump back in and tell us the story of how you put this team together. Where did it come from? Where was the idea? What were the struggles along the way? Because climbing the mountain is one struggle. This is a completely different one.
So I did not put the team together. There's this organization at the time called Climbers Club. So they came up with the idea of organizing this women's expedition to Everest, because there are so few Nepali women in mountaineering and who had climbed Everest. So they thought it was time to encourage more Nepali women into it. So they came up with this idea, and there was an open call. So all of us signed up for it. We came from different backgrounds. Most of us did not know each other at all. We just came together to climb Everest. Now, as we were, climbing Everest, there were so many socioeconomic challenges that I think, and just the goal of Everest really bonded us together. We really became one big happy family in a sense. Um, and after we climbed Everest, some of us in the team, we did not want to disband. We're like, if we could all climb Everest together, then let's keep this winning team. So and that's when I became the coordinator of this new mission. And I am not a born leader. I would much rather be a slacker, but at the time, the situation kind of demanded it. So I became the coordinator. And we started with 9 members from the original team of 10, and eventually we were 7. So 2 members quit after climbing 2 more mountains. So we thought, we're like, we all climbed Everest and we're on the front, page of all big like national dailies and everything. So we're like, okay, everybody's gonna sign us checks and support us. So why stop here? And yeah, we were young and stupid. So we thought it was going to be maybe a year, 2 years mission. But we dreamt about it on 1st of January 2009, and we completed the mission early 2015. So it took us a lot longer, and our real struggle started after climbing Everest. And when we got to the 7 summits part of it, climbing was actually the easier part. And I don't want to say this, I'm always careful when I say this because I do not want to disrespect nature in any way. I failed. Like I had to turn around from a mountain in the Andes, whereas I could climb Everest. So I can't say that the other mountains were easier. They had their challenges, but the stress we had, that came from leadership, that came from managing your own team and taking a mission that took us from one mountain to another in a different continent each time, keeping the team together, that was a way bigger challenge than any of us thought. And being a coordinator, sometimes, you have to take the brunt of it. After climbing 2 mountains, one in Australia, another in Europe, we had a gap of 2.5 years. The year 2011 was the toughest year, I would say, of my life, because we were in big loan. We could not announce the next climb without paying off the loans. Members started quitting, and some of us who stayed were still committed to the team and the dream, but we didn't know how to go about it. And we did not understand money. We didn't know why, people would celebrate us but not support us. So it was really grueling internally. And I was so I was joking with my husband that this is actually my second, social distancing. My first social distancing was in the year 2011, when I was so fragile that I couldn't meet anybody. I was too scared of meeting people. They would ask me, what's your team doing? What's the next mountain? And I didn't have an answer. So I hit my rock bottom. It was not clinical depression, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And that's when I started doing stand-up comedy. So I think it was just, I think, something to, blow the steam off at the moment. But once I got up on stage, I did that show. It was a big success. It somehow restored my confidence. I was like, okay, I'm not a problem here. I'm a sincere person and I have everything. I have a team, I have discipline, I have track record, I've had success. So, if there are these things challenging like money and few little other things, then how big can they be in front of the things that I have? So stand-up comedy gave me that perspective. So, and then we went to Africa next, and then yeah, we continued. I'm cutting it short, but yeah, we continued, and I've been on the highest peak on 4 continents. In Argentina, Andes, the highest in South America. I didn't make it because I had frostnip, so my thumb was really cold, and I decided it was safer to turn around. I could see the summit with my eyes. It was 2 hours away. I can still see it with my eyes, open or closed. But we knew the right distance was to turn around. And we still stayed with the same goal. Even if one person makes it, we're successful as a team. So later, for the rest of the mountains, we only selected certain people from our team to go, because some of the mountains, like the one in Antarctica, is super expensive. So only 4 members from my team went. So personally, I've been on 4. On the 5th, I had to turn around. I was not part of the climbing team for the last 2, but when we completed the mission, we're the first women team in the world to climb the 7 summits. So all's well that ends well.
Awesome. So what is it, you mentioned the, kind of the cost. What is it? What is a typical cost to put, 10 people on a mountain to the summit?
So it depends which mountain you're asking. So for example, Vincent Massif in Antarctica, I would say roughly keep $50,000 a person, because it's too far away, it's very expensive. For example, to climb Denali, it's probably 50,000 for the entire team. So there's a big difference. For Everest in present day and time, average that companies are charging is around $45,000. We had to raise $200,000 in 2007-8 for our team of 10 women and the bigger crew of 33 people.
And how did you go about raising, like you've raised a lot of money to do this, right? So how do you go about that today, or how did you go about that for those specific summits?
So the way we went about it was in the year 2007. So Nepal had been in this armed conflict for a decade, and that was just ending. The year 2007, 2008 was a really happening year in Nepal. So we had support from the government of Nepal. We had the United Nations World Food Program as our major sponsor. We had an organization called BP Koirala India Nepal Foundation. We had a Nepal Mountaineer Association, which is almost like our guardian association. So the tourism industry, all of this came in as our supporter, but there was not a big support from, let's say, the big private sector institutes. And in retrospect, now I can understand, because we were going through a big political, situation. So it was probably not safer for them to sponsor and all. The next 10 years after that in Nepal, we were in peace process. And now I understand that, again, that was not a great time for the private sector to sign checks. So we kept getting our support from the same set of organizations, from United Nations, the government of Nepal has been our biggest supporter, Nepal Mountaineering Association, Trekking Agencies Association of Nepal. So these organizations and organizations similar to those. Today, it's, when I say today, this current crisis, sure. We were in better times because we have elected government and stuff. So now we see that for other people trying to go about these missions, there's more money in the market. So I wish I had this knowledge back then, but now that's what I know. So we had fundraising was always nightmare. There was not a single rupee that came easy. It was a lot of convincing people. And we, in my team, we say that we have, what's the word for it in English? We have like roughened up more boots in the city than in the mountains.
So Shailee, we're getting close to time. I got one question, and I want you to tell us kind of what's next. You said something a minute ago that was kind of piqued my interest. You talked about not being able to complete one of the climbs after you kind of took the reins of the organization, and because you had to, keep the team together and get everybody to work together, you had to kind of be out in front and lead the organization and do the work of climbing the mountain. And there was a place that you couldn't get it done because of the strain that being the leader put on you. Could you talk just a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people on this call are a little bit in that same position today, having to do things that they hadn't had to do before and feeling the stress and strain from it.
So the very honest, transparent answer to that question is that I was on the mountain, and I was close to the summit. I was a climber, and we're all equal when we're on the mountain. I'm a leader when, you know, I'm putting it together, but when I'm on the mountain, my friends are much better climbers than me. So, you know, they lead. So 4 of my teammates especially were in great shape, were ahead of us, and I was like a dead weight because I had a frost nip, and I was very concerned that, you know, I mean, it may not be safe for me, but I didn't want that to hold anybody back. So I was in this dilemma for a couple hours, and at one point, we just told them that, you know, we'll catch up with you. You should go. So the 4 teammates went ahead thinking we're gonna join the 3 of us who were having one another struggle. We kind of like, you know, white lied them to them, and they were crying on the summit when they found out that we were not going up anymore. They were like, why? Like, you could have made it. So at that time, it was more than, it was, we're all equal, and we're looking out for each other. I knew that my presence might become a problem for the rest of the teammates, whereas the girls who made it on the top, they were like, oh, you should have been here. You know, the 3 of us who turned around should have been here. So as a leader, what I've actually learned during the 7 summits and the work we've been doing after that, I know we're running out of time, but I quickly want to mention the work we do for the survivors of sex trafficking, because we already had experience of working with a women team. One of the biggest things I've learned in this entire journey is that a little you do in crisis goes a long way. It's then when you have to act right. If I had continued on that mountain and had gotten into a problem, then that would have meant 4 of my teammates would have to probably bring me back down. I wouldn't have been able to walk back myself or something like that. So even they couldn't have made it to the summit, and that would mean as a team, we didn't make it to the top. So I was very clear about it. So it's a very small moment where you have to make that decision, but you know it's the right thing to do. When we started working with the survivor sisters, it was very, very hard to gain their trust because they had been exploited and abused, you know, in the past so much that it was very, very hard to gain their trust. And we kept telling them, you know, we're going to mentor them, there'll be a brighter future and all of that. And it was very hard for them to believe that. In the year 2015, we had a big earthquake in Nepal, and my teammate Maya took them on a trek after the earthquake. And when they came back from the trek and we had this session, and that's when they said that now we trust you. And we're surprised. We're like, we've been with you for more than a year now. Like, why this sudden, this thing? And they said that that trek is not a big trek, but the fact that it happened after the earthquake showed how committed you are to us. And now we know that you will not abandon us. So I find some kind of similarity between the distance we took on the Andes and taking our survivor sisters on a trek after the earthquake. These were very small steps, but we're already in a crisis there, and doing that little bit you can do in a crisis situation takes you to bigger success, and especially helps you gain trust of your teammates. When they know that you will do the right thing, you're ready to be with this team for the rest of your life.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And tell us a little bit about what you have going on now. So, you know, the current situation obviously is kind of keeping us indoors. You said this is the second time that you've done social distancing. So what are you working on? What's new for Shailee, and what's going to be new in the rest of the year and into next year?
So with all my ongoing work, I'm on a wait and watch mode because I can afford to do that. So as you know, you've heard me speaking. So all the speaking work right now is on hold. So I'm not traveling anywhere. All my comedy gigs are also on hold. I was supposed to do a big show in New York, but obviously that's on hold. So I'm in no rush with these things. I'm just gonna wait and watch because I know there's a big industry involved in this. So I'm in I'm together with everybody on this. The work we do for the Survivor Sisters is super important to us, and the tourism industry is going to be hit hard. So we've been training them to become trekking guides. So now we have to think about what can we do differently so that they can still be equally, if not more, like empowered. So that's something. We have a GoFundMe account set up if there's anybody who's interested to support them. That's on our website. So that's something, that's where we have to do new thinking. We are not immediately affected by it because our training period is at least a year anyways. So we can still have a bit of that wait and watch mode for the survivor training program. So I'm a bit kind of, insulated in a sense. Well, not truly in a sense. I'm a very optimistic person. That's why I'm saying I'm insulated. But what is completely kind of strange and not related to anything we've talked so far is that I have been getting requests from very close family and friends, and also mid to big organizations to help with meditation. So I'm a trainer, but for the longest time, I was kind of in denial. I kept telling myself, who am I to teach anybody meditation? Like, this is a very private thing for me. I don't want to do it. I just want to sit and do it myself. And actually, it is related to the last thing I said. After talking to a few people who told me what they were going through and that they really needed somebody who can help them with some meditation practice. And I was like, yeah, a little in crisis would mean a lot, for the person. And that's why I said yes. So now I'm doing online meditation classes for Survivor Sisters, for some of my friends and family. A couple organizations are going to open up. So starting next week, I'll probably be like doing 4 or 5 sessions every day to kind of help organizing all of this. I'm also going to start a blog on meditation sometime around next week.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you're keeping busy. Be sure and share all those links with us so we can put it into the blog that we send out in the recap of this presentation. We're right up on time, so I want to be respectful of that. Sincerely appreciate you being here. What time is it there now? It's like 1 a.m. or?
12:43. I don't know if you can see it. 12:43.
12:43. So I know it's late and we kept you up half the night. So just love having you on here, and the stories that you tell and the struggles and successes that you had through those struggles. I think gives perspective to some of the things that we're going through this COVID-19 piece and the change and pivots we're all having to make. Please reach out to us as well if we can do anything to help you in any way. And I will see you very soon. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.